Bienvenidos a Tres Respuestas, un espacio de conversación, de opinión y de propuestas. Nos encontramos en este momento en Israel, en Jerusalén, y tenemos un invitado muy especial. Se trata de Yariv Becher, quien es el director de Innovación y Proyección del Centro de Startup Nation, que es el centro creado en este país para la promoción de los startups, de la innovación, de la tecnología y, por supuesto, acelerador de emprendimiento. Es un verdadero modelo de referencia y me complace tener a un invitado como Yariv. Such a pleasure to be here in Israel, Yariv. And just want to start by asking you, tell me about who you are. Tell me about your life. Tell me about how you made all this career in order to have such an important role today in what is one of the greatest world accelerators of entrepreneurship, which is the Startup Center of Israel.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be hosted today in this podcast, and thank you again for visiting Israel. It's always a pleasure to see you and meet with you. My career, I'm not sure it's very impressive. I've been with Startup Nation Central for about 3 years. Before that, I spent 13 years in the Ministry of Economy and Industry. I served as Israel's commercial attaché to the U.S. Midwest and then to London. And I started my career before that. I spent about 8 years in one of Israel's leading cybersecurity companies, not on the technology side, finance and business. But if you look at my career trajectory, I've touched on different aspects of the innovation ecosystem, and I've been working in that space for over 20 years.
When people think about Israel, the people have also in their top of mind the concept of startup nation, a nation that along its history has faced scarcity, and that scarcity has triggered innovation. And there was a book published some years ago, and that book with that very important title made reference to specific elements that have made Israel a startup nation. One of those has to do with family traditions, has to do with the military service, has to do also with companies that receive funding from the Yosma funds and accelerator funds. So based on that experience that you just mentioned about your life, how did you get involved in the concept of startup nation, and why do you consider Israel is a startup nation?
So first of all, yes, the book came out in 2009, really coined the phrase startup nation, and that really caught on very good. And I think it really embodies the characteristics of Israel's innovation ecosystem, which I have to say, first of all, this is the major driver of economic growth and prosperity in Israel. The tech industry in Israel accounts for about 20% of the GDP. For example, if you compare that to oil and gas in Russia, which is about 16% of GDP, so I understand this is sort of our natural resource. It accounts for over 50% of Israel's exports, over 35% of income tax, so really a driver for economic growth. And you did touch on a number of the characteristics or ingredients that are important or that made up this innovation ecosystem. So first of all, really lack of natural resources. Up until 2006, when we found large deposits of natural gas off the shores of Israel, we didn't have any natural resource. So we had to rely mainly on human capital and human brain power. That, coupled with the innovation entrepreneurship spirit in Israel, which is something that we coined in Startup Nation Central, we call this impatient innovation. Impatient in a good way. I know we teach our children that patience is a virtue, but when you build a startup, that restlessness, the mission-oriented, the total lack of respect to hierarchy, which sometimes can be a bit annoying, but when you have a startup and you need to grow quickly, is very helpful. Usually, I think of I heard once an interview with a CEO of a leading VC in Israel that said that just the idea of creating a state, building a country out of basically nothing is entrepreneurship, and that is embedded in our DNA from the beginning. And that experience, that the first immigrants that came to Israel, the turn of the 20th century, their day-to-day experience, the challenges that they needed to address, that sort of forced innovation and forced entrepreneurship. And also studies show that where there is a large concentration of immigration, there is a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation activity, because immigrants, they come to a new place, they see things a bit differently, they have challenges that they need to overcome, and that drives them to create that creative thinking. And you mentioned also the government's role that it played over the years. In certain areas, that the government was able to, first of all, understand the need, the importance of technology and innovation in the growth of the economy in Israel, and the different needs over the years in terms of creating capital. You mentioned the Yozma program. So building that venture community that would invest in startups. A special program that initiated that. And actually today, you see most of the leading VCs in Israel are either descendants of that program, or executives in other VCs are ones that grew up from junior levels when they worked in different VCs that were established through that program 30 years ago. So the government was able to identify market failures and to address them in a way that was effective, and also in a way that enabled the government to withdraw once it addressed the challenge and it was overcome, and then move along.
When I think about the history of this country, Yariv, Israel has or is celebrating its 80th year of existence. And in the last maybe 4, 5 decades, maybe 4, the concept of the startup nation has been evolving. So I would say maybe when Israel was mid-age, this concept is starting to take place. And there was a need for resources, but there was also a big need for talent. And something that the Startup Nation book raises is the role of the military, and particularly the intelligence unit, where many talented people have been selected, identified, and brought to different industries to become the leaders of those sectors. How would you describe that challenge as part of the Startup Nation concept? And maybe let me also introduce something else, which is scarcity and permanent threat drive not only innovation, but awareness. So how do those elements combined represent a great recipe for success?
So as you're probably aware, over the past 2 years, it has been apparent our security and geopolitical situation, which is very unfortunate, but has driven us to invest a lot in technology, through the military, and also in the talent. Now, in Israel, you have obligatory prescription. Everyone needs to join the army at the age of 18. And very quickly, over, let's say, 6 months of training, a lot of them become officers and commanders, and they are responsible for other people's lives. And they're in situations where they need to make life decisions, life or death decisions. And that is a process, how unfortunate it is, that really enables people, to be able to take responsibility, make decisions, think very quickly, be very creative. That's on the one hand. The other is, in order to maintain our competitive advantage, we have invested a lot in technology. That feeds into the tech industry in a number of ways. One is the talent. But the other is also technologies. There are technologies that are developed in the military and can have civil application uses, and we see that in different areas. One of the interesting ones is Given Imaging, a company that was acquired by Medtronic, one of the successes in Israel's medical device industry. It is basically, we call it a pill cam. It's a pill that you can swallow that is an artificial pill that has a camera in it, and it replaces the need for a colonoscopy. And it was designed by a defense, a missile engineer, that his mother needed to go through this procedure, and he said, "This is horrible. We must find a better way to do this medical examination." And he basically took the idea of a guided missile you miniaturize it into a pill. Basically, if you see the pill itself, it looks like a miniaturized guided missile. And so this is, I think, an excellent example of how you take technology that was developed for defense use and you apply it for civil with good objectives.
So that unit was called in the book like the Harvard of Israel, because in order to get there, you have to at least demonstrate a certain amount of skills. But then you also had to move to get the resources. And that's why a venture capital industry was born. But then the government had to put some money there initially. That was the purpose of the Yosmat funds. And then the industry started growing on its own, and there are some incentives that have been created and so on. The concept of having a Startup Nation Center, when did that happen and for what purpose?
So our organization is a non-government, non-profit organization that was established about 13 years ago to strengthen the ecosystem and provide a service, by the way, a service that we don't charge for. We are fully funded by philanthropy and we don't take government money, but to address the need that the industry has. Israel is a very small market. It's in the Middle East, our neighbors, some of them which we do have relations, some we don't, they are not the go-to destination market for the Israeli industry. So most of the tech, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons that it's a global industry in Israel, is because of the small market here, the only market that speaks Hebrew. If you want to sell technology, you need to address global markets. So you would go to the US, you would go to Europe. And so people here think globally from the beginning. Now, our understanding was, our organization, I wasn't there at the time, that connection with the global markets is something that needs to be addressed. Now, our founders tell the story that they read Startup Nation, the book, were inspired by it. We're talking with their peers and colleagues, CEOs of multinational companies, that they were inspired by the book as well, came to Israel with the book under their arm and wanted to engage with the ecosystem in Israel and find the right opportunities, but didn't know where to go. So we created the organization as sort of a grand central station where you would come and we will help you access and navigate the ecosystem and find the right opportunities, not just to identify them, but also make the connection and help it grow and cultivate it. And so we've been working for over a decade with leading multinational companies, foreign global organizations, understanding their needs, their challenges, helping them find the right opportunities in Israel, helping them engage, either by sourcing technology, investing, or opening an innovation activity in Israel. We've been doing the same thing with investors as well. And over the past 3 years, following the signing of the Abraham Accords, we are also leveraging Israel's innovation capabilities in order to strengthen relations with countries of strategic importance here in the region.
When I think about the kind of technologies that you have promoted, I think on GPS technologies, I think on cybersecurity, health tech, gov tech, agri-tech. It's a multiplicity of sectors. And I remember that when I was in office, I made a visit to the Startup Nation Central, and I received a gift, which was a book called Chutzpah, a word that defines many things of the Israeli DNA. How would you describe what Chutzpah is for people who are listening to us in the Americas? And how do you believe the concept of Chutzpah can also be connected with this idea of creating a startup hub that becomes a reference model for the world?
So chutzpah, I would say, is being very bold, straightforward, sometimes not very respectful of different manners and cultures, but it being very direct. I said before, I think it's an important trait when you create a startup and you need to work very quickly. To be honest, as a father of kids, sometimes I would want them to have a bit less chutzpah and be more respectful of the hierarchy. But that is this characteristic of being very straightforward and blunt. If you speak with an Israeli, you will very quickly understand what they think and what they mean. I think that sometimes creates a bit of friction in other cultures that are they use more understatement and nuance. We find ourselves as an organization being in that buffer and creating what we call frictionless access to Israel's impatient innovation, and helping bridge that gap.
Do you believe that the Startup Nation concept and this is specific criteria that have made Israel so successful can be exported, that can be adopted in other countries? What do countries need to do in order to be suitable for the Startup Nation concept?
So we touched on a number of ingredients that are important. I think I am a student of history, so I think that every country has its own circumstances and context. You can, if you look at it in sort of an academic way, there are certain things that you need in order to create an innovation ecosystem. And that is, of course, human capital, talent. You need to have intellectual capital, and that is the research. You need to have financial capital and entrepreneurship capital. And you can find all these ingredients in different countries, but in different ways. So there isn't necessarily, or there is a recipe that you can use and different ingredients that you can take, but you need to find the right assets that you have with each different country. And I think, Israel perhaps is advanced in that, but there are many countries, probably almost any country you can think of, is in a different stage in the journey to become a technology-oriented economy or a technology-dependent economy, because that is the future. And we have been talking with governments in different places in the world, what you can learn from the Israel experience, extrapolate from it, understand what are the universal lessons that can be learned, and how you can apply them to your own country and find the right ingredients there. So, for example, we talked about the military in Israel. One of the things that it creates is a very tight network. People know each other. They serve together in the military. It's very it's a very dense community, and that network enables you to harness different resources. In other countries, what would be similar would be the university, or other countries that have different military or national service that they provide, that they need to look and identify what are the networks that they have that they can enable. So it's not that Israel is unique, and I don't think that there are other countries that can't have a thriving innovation ecosystem. What is unique for each country, it's its own circumstances and how you can leverage the assets that you have in order to create your own innovation ecosystem.
When you think about the role of the state, there's an economist that has been very controversial, Mariana Mazzucato, where she talks about the entrepreneurial state. Do you think government should be actively a venture capital provider, or do you think it's much better for the government just to allow the rules of the market to operate? So do you get the state focused on cherry picking, but instead you really give the private sector the possibility of defining the criteria that would allow them to identify, select, and promote or accelerate those companies that can really make a disruption in the future?
So again, looking at our own history and our experience, what I can say is that we have been able, we as the government, the Israeli state, was able to identify certain gaps and challenges and address them. And the main principle has always been, there are a number of principles that are different programs, but the principles are the same. One is we want to encourage risk-taking. So the government reduces the risks by taking an active part, usually financing, but never finance 100% of a project or a program or a different venture. The entrepreneur needs to have skin in the game because they manage the money better when they have their own money in it and they make better decisions. The government doesn't make money off of the activity. Usually, you repay. You get a grant, which is up to 50%, depends on the different programs, and you repay without only minimal interest. The government doesn't make an exit out of it. And you pay only if the project is successful and there are revenues. That is the reduction of risk, or the government taking part in the risk and encouraging. That way you encourage people to take risk and develop technology that is deep tech, that is the competitive edge that you have. So I think the government needs to play a role where there are gaps, but in a way that would encourage entrepreneurship activity and can withdraw once you address the challenge.
If you were to select the Startup Nation Central Hall of Fame of those startups that receive funding and that are now successful case stories, which ones would you say in your maybe top 3, top 5?
Oh, there are many. And I don't want anyone be offended that I didn't mention them. I didn't already mention Given Imaging, which is a great example. It's a great example because it's deep tech, right? It's not just an application, an app, a different service that you have, but a company where you have to invest a lot in the technology itself. And again, that's where the government money comes in and is important. I think just to mention a few examples that were recently in the news, and I think actually there is one that is it's an outlier, but exemplifies the story of the startup nation. So in March, it was announced that Google is going to acquire Wiz, which is a cybersecurity company, for $32 billion. It's the biggest merger and acquisition deal that was done in Israel ever. One of the biggest of Google, one of the biggest in the cybersecurity industry. And I'm mentioning that because the story is interesting. The company was founded by a few co-founders that served together in 8200, that intelligence unit in the military, right? That's where they got the training. When they got out of the army, they started a startup together. It was acquired by Microsoft. That was their first exit. And then the CEO of the startup became the site manager of Microsoft in Israel. And he worked there for a number of years and learned that corporate culture of how you build a growth company, how you grow the company and you manage a corporation. We talked about the impatient innovation, which is great for startups, but if you want to build large enterprises, then you need that corporate culture. So after having the training in the military, he had the training in Microsoft on how you build a large company. After spending a few years doing that, he said, okay, now it's time to do my next venture. A more seasoned founder and entrepreneur. And again, with the team that they served together in the military, and they created Wiz. And now, after they had also their financial exit from the first sale of their first company, now their motivation was they have a new challenge to build a growth company, and they build this company that was at the end of the day that was bought by Google, and that exemplifies the trajectory that the ecosystem in Israel has gone over the past 20, 30 years. That maturity, which is I don't want to take away from the Startup Nation slogan, but we're towards a scale-up nation, more growth companies.
One person asked me when I want to travel back to Israel, what did I consider the main strengths of this country? Obviously, Israel was brutally attacked almost 2 years ago, in October 7th. That triggered a reaction, but also triggered many reflections. And I remember that when those events occurred, some months after, a book written by some of the co-authors of Startup Nation, they created this book called The Genius of Israel.
and they talk about many virtues and principles, but they especially have one chapter that I love that is called Thanksgiving Every Weekend, which is a way of describing what the Shabbat is and why everybody gathers inside the family and makes all these gratitude expressions. What would you thank, or who would you thank for creating in this country the concept of a startup nation that will then use this mantra or this vision as the source of having more IPOs, bringing more capital, having more round A's, round B's, and having this entrepreneurial opportunity not only flourishing, but growing steadily and substantially?
I think we touched on a number of contributing factors, and organizations and different entities. But I think that if there is one that I need to choose, is the people, and that Israeli character. I think what we have seen after October 7th, this self-mobilization, okay, and the tech industry played an important part. As you mentioned, it was first of all was major crisis. We were caught by surprise. A lot of the different systems didn't work that day, which is the result of what happened. But also afterwards, it was chaos, and many of the civil systems that needed to work, they just collapsed. And the people mobilized themselves, and you had grassroots organizations of people. I myself, by the way, my military service was a desk job, and I'm too old to do reserve duty. But people mobilized, and so we had families in our neighborhood that the father or the mother were off in reserve duty, either fighting or doing something, and the spouse was left at home with kids, and they needed help. So me and my wife, we cooked, and I was driving, and there were sirens going off, and just dropping off food for people. That characteristic of people, rising up to the task and working together. That is I think the core of our success, and that is the reason I think that we've been able to withstand what's been going on.
The idea of a startup nation has become a very important, I would say, element of Israeli foreign policy. But many people also believe that much else can be done. What do you think is pending in order to have the right incentives to bring more capital and bring entrepreneurs from the rest of the world to Israel?
So perhaps it's an opportunity to mention, as I think I mentioned before, we have a pillar of activity which we call innovation diplomacy. Our organization was founded in order to, with the goal of strengthening the ecosystem. In our innovation diplomacy activity, the innovation ecosystem is not the goal, it's the means. How you leverage Israel's innovation capabilities in order to strengthen the relations with, we were focusing on countries in the region, following the signing of the Abraham Accords. I can go in more detail and share with you things that we have done. But part of it was sharing that experience of how, and our knowledge and best practices of how you develop an innovation ecosystem, and bringing people from other countries to come and learn, either by doing business here or working here in startups and VCs, and having hands-on experience that they can take with them and go back to their countries and use the knowledge that they acquired here when they develop their innovation ecosystem. And hopefully, when their innovation ecosystem flourishes and there's a lot of collaboration, they will remember that they learned some from us.
If you were to maybe think of the right recipe to replicate the model of Startup Nation, what would that recipe look like, for example, in a country like Colombia or Peru, that are middle-income countries? They're transforming their economies, but they need to empower more entrepreneurs to be formal and be able to grow in a steady but congruent way.
I think it's a combination of things that you need to put in place. First of all, identifying the different resources that you have. I think from my experience and knowledge of the Colombian community, there is entrepreneurship, right? You need to take that characteristic and perhaps directed a bit in looking into technology-related opportunities that address challenges that you have. In Israel, we say Israel is quite advanced in water-related technology because we have scarcity in water, right? So necessity is the mother of all innovation. Focusing on the challenges that you have, I think the government needs to, and you can look at different programs either in Israel or other places in the world, how you encourage venture investments. That's not something, the fact that there is capital somewhere doesn't mean that capital knows how to invest in tech, right? That's something that you need to train. Something that we also
what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. So you need to know how to identify an opportunity, how to do due diligence, how do you measure the potential success of that investment, and what to expect in terms of the chances of success and when you will see your return, because it's a different mindset. You're not investing in real estate, for example, where you have a steady income, annual income or monthly income that you get. It's a different model, and it's a different mindset that people need to adjust to, and the government can play a role in explaining those different criteria.
If you're going to maybe think on what will be the next chapter of innovation in Israel, and you were to look at cybersecurity, crypto, blockchain, education technology, financial inclusion, which sectors do you believe are going to be the next big bet of Israel?
So I think I'm not necessarily, I would say, a sector, but an underlining theme, and that is deep tech. Deep tech, meaning leveraging AI capabilities, quantum computing, and that could be applied to different sectors, right? It's relevant for healthcare. It's relevant for cyber. It's relevant for automotive. It's relevant. So, and I think that is basically one of the reasons that the tech industry in Israel was able to lift off so strongly is the fact that in those more traditional industries, healthcare, agriculture, food, what has happened over the past 20 years, automotive is a great example, is the use of data. Israel traditionally, again, because of the lack of natural resources, our strong suit was in working with data. Telecommunications is an industry that grew in Israel at the beginning of the 90s. The ability to collect data, analyze it, and then create automatic systems that use that data. And these different sectors that were more traditional, they have gone digital, and they're using a lot of data in healthcare and precision agriculture, and that's where we were able to take part. And just again, to take that automotive example, there are no Israeli car manufacturers. We tried it once in the 70s. It was a failure. When I was growing up, a lot of jokes of camels eating the cars, not very successful. There is no foreign car manufacturer that's manufacturing in Israel, unlike you have in other countries, where in Eastern Europe you have German car manufacturers, and Mexico, American car manufacturers. Yet, in almost every brand OEM, major car brand, or tier one companies that are companies that have market caps of billions of dollars, have innovation activity in Israel. And that is because today a car is basically a computer on wheels, and they understand that the value that they can get from working with the Israeli innovation ecosystem. And there are almost over 400 different startups in the automotive space. And that, by the way, is it's important to mention the role that multinational companies play in Israel. There are over 450 multinational companies that have innovation activity in Israel. No sales and marketing, back office, call centers. Innovation activity in Israel, because they understand the value that they can get from the activity here.
So, since we're getting to the end of this conversation, if you were to look at an entrepreneur in Latin America, and you were to invite him or her to come to the Startup Nation Central, why would they have to say yes immediately? I will go there. What is it that they're going to receive that will make a unique experience and give them a boost in the way they want to develop as entrepreneurs?
So aside from being in the center of Tel Aviv, which is probably one of the best places in the world to visit in terms of weather and culture and food, hopefully what they will get is inspiration, because we are able to show you what a thriving innovation ecosystem looks like, and how you take ideas and you create billions of dollars of worth of companies, in terms of being able to take an idea and materialize it, commercialize it, and build something that would create impact.
We're living in times of great stress. I know how difficult the last 2 years have been. There's now a possibility eventually of having a ceasefire in Gaza, but at the same time, what happened on October 7th was not just an attack, it was a real structural threat for the stability and the existence of the state of Israel. How do you think Israel is going to use Startup Nation concept as the best way of having a soft diplomacy and bringing new people from new generations to understand how difficult it has been for Israel to survive, a country that since immediate moment of creation has been fighting wars and trying to deter enemies to attack the existence of this state. How do you think Israel can be prepared now, and how Startup Nation Central can be instrumental or pivotal for that?
So hopefully we will have a deal soon, and the hostages will come back, and the war will end. And I think that would create an opportunity, which we see. I mentioned we do a lot of activity in the region in different countries, and we see people waiting for this situation to end in order to get to a different stage where we can have a much more expanded regional collaboration. And what we bring to the table is that innovation capabilities. Countries in the region look to us to learn from the experience that we have, and also to be able to harness the technology solutions that we can offer as a country. And I really believe that is the basis of fruitful and genuine partnership that we can create in the region, and we are very active in bringing that forward. Now we're laying the foundations for it, and once the opportunity is present, we'll be able to capitalize on it and really bring that to life.
And my last question: what do you think is going to be your legacy?
At Startup Nation Central, I think that our legacy is that. Repeating myself perhaps a bit, but how in Israeli innovation can impact the world and address shared global challenges.
Yariv, thank you so much. It has been a great honor to have you in Tres Respuestas. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what Startup Nation Central is doing for the world, and for the reference model. It is also for new generations. The fact that we have a group of young social innovators coming from Colombia to Israel and then having this experience and learning is just fascinating. So thank you so much, and I look forward to see you in Bogota.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Bueno.